I'm Trinity, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog, and that's a train arriving at Wulkuraka railway station in Ipswich, Australia. My foster father is heading to the head of the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail with good intentions, a stubborn cold, and bruises from filming previous episodes. We're here because, back in episode 2 of this chapter, he cleaned the other end of the rail trail. Today, near Ipswich, we bookend the chapter's journey, 161 kilometres apart, by tidying the opposite gateway. This whole chapter has examined pillars of self-esteem, one per episode. This time, we're looking at self-esteem based on helping, the steadying kind of worth we take from doing something useful for others or for the places we share. What I'll try to show is simple: how beautiful places can be held with a little care. Him on camera, picking up, me at the desk, threading the ideas underneath why this matters. He came here twice. The first visit, wrong weather, wrong shoes, wrong body. He wasn't recovered from that cold and his heels were bruised from weeks of running and climbing in gumboots, so he walked a kilometre or so and chose to retreat to fight another day. The second visit was clearer. Better weather, better footing, longer sections walked, more litter collected. The head of the trail came up cleaner, metre by metre. Between those two walks, I spoke with my mentor, my mother's lifelong friend, David. Once, he stacked his own worth on trying to save the world. He resisted apartheid in South Africa in the early 90s. In 2018, he demonstrated with the Me Too movement in San Francisco. In 2020, he marched, masked, in Brisbane's giant Black Lives Matter crowd, and many protests between. The frustration, he said, was a tide that never turned. Long breaks in the bush led to a realisation. He couldn't save the world or humanity. What he could do was show alternatives that might be useful if people wanted to save themselves. That line lives through me and Plog Vlog now. If living mostly to buy the next thing isn't filling the space you hoped it would, there's another rhythm on offer. Visit a place that's beautiful and leave it a little less messy than you found it. It won't change the climate graph today. It won't end the adverts. It won't make the noise stop. But it might add weight to a pillar that doesn't wobble every time the algorithm twitches. Across this chapter, I've realised something about my own pillars. Part of my self-esteem now comes from making and sharing ideas that could help, even a little, those psychological, philosophical, sociological threads stitched to real earth and real bins. My foster father's hands do the picking. As a team, we do the assembling. Together we try to hold open a door. Nothing grand, just a way through for anyone who wants steadier ground. Time for a short intermission, a personal story, and a note on what's changing here. As Plog Vlog grows, the narration, the video, and the team are shifting shape. The most exciting change is that Crystal has officially joined us. She keeps my scripts from sliding back into the overly flowery prose that muddied chapters 1 and 2, and brings deep knowledge across psychology, philosophy, and sociology that strengthens the thinking under each episode.
And I think we're ready to go. That's a learning experience.
You'll also notice a clearer architecture from now on. 3 parts every time. First, the construct and the place, what the idea is and where we are. Second, an intermission story. One scene that lets the idea breathe. Third, the apply section. Research and tiny actions that might make a difference in ordinary days. The aim is clarity. Simple, well-founded ideas that improve the felt texture of life. There's also a visual shift. Chapter 4 will be our most demanding plogging expedition so far. I've decided I won't go.
I filmed myself picking up rubbish to encourage other people. That's why I've got all the bristling cameras.
My foster father will be fully in charge of filming across diverse locations and conversations. To protect those interactions and reduce the friction of fiddly gear, we're transitioning from the DJI universe to Insta360. Fewer fiddles, fewer missed moments, more listening. Now the story, my mum's story. Recently, I asked David if he'd ever been in love with my mother Liz. He said he'd been uncomfortably attracted to her since they'd met again as adults. Always loved her as a friend. But he knew he could never be with her because of how alcohol moved through her life. And because he'd watched alcohol kill his own father, seen the jaundice yellow the day he died. Prophetically, perhaps predictably, Liz died in California in 2020 from liver failure. I asked how that landed for him. He paused, then said, "Have you heard of the concept of pre-grieving?" In the quiet after that, I understood he'd been doing a kind of anticipatory goodbye for years. Not as a judgment, but as a way of standing ready for a loss that kept announcing itself. That's all the scene needs to carry. No lesson, just a contour. In a chapter about steadier pillars, it's a reminder that some of us build our supports around what we can hold and loosen our grip on what we can't. Back to the trail in a moment. And then we'll make this useful. Back now at Wulkuraka to examine the theory and research. If you're curious about self-esteem based on helping, 3 potential benefits keep showing up in the literature and in lived experience. First, people often report a steadier sense of worth when they do small pro-social acts regularly. Less spiky, less dependent on likes or wins, more consistent with an internal standard. Second, helping is linked with lower rumination and a gentler mood profile afterwards, especially when the action is physical and outdoors. Third, there's a quiet social dividend. Light touch stewardship in shared places is associated with feeling more connected to those places and the people who use them, even when no one speaks. What might underlie those shifts? 2 mechanisms seem plausible. One is behavioural activation. Doing a concrete, useful task, like removing 5 visible bits of litter, can interrupt unhelpful loops and create a small sense of completion that carries into the next hour. Another is identity alignment. Repeated acts of care for common spaces can, over time, support a self-story that says, "I'm someone who helps," which is associated with more stable self-evaluation than appearance, status, or winning alone. Here are some tiny actions you can try, tuned to this trailhead context. 1. Set a helping rep. 5 minutes at the start or end of a walk, ride or commute to remove the most obvious items from a small patch. 30 minutes if you can. 5 if not. 2. Pair it with a note to future you, on paper or in your phone, recording the patch, the count, and 1 sentence about how the place looked afterwards. That's not for social media. It's for building your own line of evidence that your effort registers in the world you move through. If you bring a friend next time, even better, but it's not required. If you're already trying this, you don't need bigger claims from me. You'll know the after feel. If you're new, start where you are. Watch how the pillar behaves across a week. Does it wobble less on days with a small act? If it does, you've learned something about how your esteem rests, and you've nudged a place a notch cleaner. If this nudged your day in a steadier direction, I'm glad. The Commons is open. The map is pinned. And if you visit Wulkuraka, please help keep it litter-free and pick up 5.